Right, Dany, Steven, buddies, I appreciate you for coming on the podcast. I know it's early in Montreal right now. So first of all, thank you so much for making this happen together.
It's our pleasure, man. We're happy to be here and happy to be invited onto your podcast.
Yeah, so you guys are working on a really cool company called Pink Genomix, which is basically designed to help people understand about their bodies and the type of lifestyle they should live by studying their DNA. Can you tell us a bit more about your company? What is it exactly? What is the technology that powers your product? And what exactly does it help people do in terms of understanding themselves and making smarter life decisions? Because you really are in one of the most emerging industries out there that I'm personally super passionate about and that I see so much potential in the future about that. So I really want to hear your thoughts about this.
I'll hop into this one. So basically what we do is we do genetic testing through saliva. It's a super non-invasive, really easy procedure for collecting the saliva. So it's like a little sponge. You go into the person's mouth. You basically collect. You put the sponge on the bottom of the mouth 10 times on this side, 10 times, just like brushing your teeth, 10 times on that side. And then you put the little sponge back into the chemistry that stabilizes the DNA. And then you send that to our lab. Lab extracts, analyzes the DNA, and then gives us information about your genome. Now, obviously, when you extract DNA, there's a million things that you can analyze. There's like a bunch of different things. You can do diagnostics. You can do analysis of various, just genetic traits. So you can do just a bunch of things. But what we focus on specifically is fitness and nutrition, as well as stress and rest, like stress and sleep, for example. And what we do with that information is we give people sort of a blueprint or a guideline to what their body reacts best to in terms of diet, fitness, and how they would react in a stressful situation in a general sense, because that one goes a little more in depth, and we can talk about it a little later. But that's in the general sense. The goal of that, the reason why we think it's important or the solution that we solve in our business is that a lot of people approach the fitness world basically blindly. Basically, if I was, for example, going into the fitness world for the first time in my life, I'm going to Google best way to lose weight. First things that pop up: 6-pack abs in 10 minutes, or like, how to lose weight in 30 days, or all these generic workout plans and diet plans that are sort of tried and tested with a small group of population that worked for them, but might not work for me. And you know what? Chances are it's not going to work for me. So by having a blueprint of how my body works and what is going to react best with my body in terms of what are the types of nutrients I should be eating, what types of workouts I should be doing. Should I do a high intensity interval training, or should I do a, slow, long distance run? So if I understand how my body works, I'll understand how I can use this information to better myself on my health and wellness journey. And by having this information about what reacts best with my body and how my body reacts best in different situations will allow me to maximize and optimize my workouts to not only get through my health and wellness journey faster, but to work on something that's sustainable and that I can maintain on a long-term basis.
What's interesting is that you guys decided to go with the fitness route, which is a great industry by itself. But just like you said, when you do have access to someone's DNA in a sense, you're able to understand everything about them, not just the fitness. But that is kind of the angle you've taken with your company. But in the sense of DNA, when you have access to someone's genetic traits, you can literally understand most of what the person is. You can know what the person looks like in a sense, like their eye colors, their hair color, their skin color. You can understand their intelligence level. You can really get a very good idea about someone on so many different aspects of their life. But then I'm curious, how much of, let's take the example of fitness because that's what you guys are in. How much how how much does DNA represent of their traits in a sense? So let's say, because there's a lot of variables that affect someone's lifestyle. Let's take the example of stress. How much of someone's stress level is attributed to genes compared to it attributed to someone's environment, someone's upbringing, someone's lifestyle of eating. So how much would you categorize that in there?
Yeah, maybe I can jump on it. So,
Yes, Stephen.
like, that's actually a question that a lot of our clients have, or also a lot of our partners they have. Because when we introduce the product, is that we say we're going to analyze your DNA and we're going to be able to tell you a little more about you. So, like Dany said, like our main goal is to reduce trial and error. But you also have to think about that it's not like DNA is not your destiny, meaning that it's not because you have the genes of a marathon runner that the next day you're like, okay, I have the genes of a marathon runner. I'm going to be able to run the marathon. Like there's also, it's DNA, but it's also your environment. Like if you stay on your couch every day and then you do our test, and then we tell you, oh, you have the potential of becoming a marathon runner. If you've never trained yourself to it, you're not actually going to be able to achieve that. So it's a combination of environment and DNA. So, but when you know your genetics, you can actually influence better your environment to make sure that it works perfectly together. So it's like, I guess I could say it's a 50-50, but environment and DNA combined together make who you are. So DNA is not your destiny. That's, I guess, the message that we
That's
always
true.
trying to.
Yeah, that's true. It's like an equation. You need both to achieve something. I'd like to talk about sleep a bit because I think sleep is one of the things that are not enough talked about in a culture of performance. You know, as individuals, our success in the 21st century culture is dependent on how productive we are in a sense. And I think sleep is really something that's not talked about. So, what is it exactly about sleep that Pink Genomics can tell someone?
So that one's that's one of the reasons why I said it's a little more in depth. It's in a general sense to talk about stress and sleep. Sleep has, it's in itself is a complex sort of system. Okay, like people think about sleep as just I close my eyes and I wake up. Or they're like I dream sometimes, or if you want to go even just a little further, they'll talk about REM sleep or non-REM sleep. And
Right.
so we hit a few different genes in the genomics of a person, and a few of these genes help us to analyze a person's ability to get deep sleep. So different levels of sleep, even within REM and non-REM, there's different phases, right? So I mean, if you're going to talk about non-REM sleep is when you're like in super deep sleep mode where it's
Right.
hardest to wake somebody up, right? And then REM sleep is when somebody is maybe dreaming or it's easier to wake them up. So for example, if we can analyze somebody's ability to reach deep sleep, and when you reach deep sleep is when you have memory consolidation. For example, it's when you're thinking about your day, it's analyzing it, storing it into memories, turning it into maybe long-term memories. If you're learning somebody's name, for example, it might be at that point that it's storing it in your memory box in your brain, right? And if somebody has trouble reaching a deep state of sleep, that means that their level, and it's also, sorry, one of the it's the point where your body is recovering the most. Like I don't know the specifics. I'm not a doctor myself. I don't know the specifics on to how your body and your muscles are recovering at that point. But deep sleep has been shown to be one of the most important things to help your body recover. For muscle recovery, for even memory recovery, for a bunch of different things. And if you have, for example, a gene that prevents you from achieving deep sleep, or if you're part of a group of people whose genomic code doesn't prove that you have a long term of deep sleep, or what people might say a light sleeper, you might have trouble recovering. You might have trouble with memory consolidation, maybe having trouble with, like, for example, storing the memories for the long term. It might not be something extremely significant where, like, if, for example, today we're talking and then tomorrow I'm going to forget your name. It's not going to be like to that level, but maybe somebody who has deeper sleep has maybe a better memory. I don't know exactly the correlation between the two, to what level of and how in depth it is for the connection between the two, but it's shown that deep sleep is related to memory consolidation and recovery of the body to a certain extent. So that means that if somebody doesn't have proper sleep, it means that their body isn't recovering at an optimal level. And if you know that information, if I told you, for example, hey, Leon, like your body doesn't recover well, or you don't have a good sleep system because you're a light sleeper, you have a hard time achieving a deep level of sleep. So then what we can do on an active side of it, so how can we mediate that, right? It's, well, okay, I don't achieve deep sleep, so what can I do? Well, there's a few things that you can take that will help you achieve deep sleep. For example, maybe taking melatonin, maybe taking GABA, some things that help promote deep sleep, or maybe doing a meditation before you sleep just to help your brain waves relax and your brain waves calm down. Maybe you should avoid coffee a little earlier, maybe give yourself 8 hours before you sleep to avoid having coffee completely, just so there's no interaction between the caffeine protein, the caffeine molecule, and the certain parts of your brain that get active during the sleep part. So knowing that's one of the most important things for sleep, is being able to achieve deep sleep, being able to achieve it. And then it's knowing if you can, first of all, achieve it, and how can that benefit your body. So if we did dive into it and we're like, okay, these are the things you should do to get deeper sleep, you'll recover better maybe after a workout. If you were to study long periods of time or do some long projects, allow yourself to reach that deep level of sleep, so your brain calms down, you're fresh the next day, you're hot on your feet, you're ready to go. And some things to help you maintain that busy lifestyle of an entrepreneur and a student and all those things. So yeah.
I could really see how this could be of incredible value to someone, because I've come to a point in my life about 3 years ago where I started taking my sleep very seriously. I think I was having sleep problems, so what I invested in was actually an Aura ring. Have you guys ever heard of the Aura ring?
No,
No.
I haven't.
Oh, you haven't? It's like the most accurate sleep tracker in the industry. And it has like incredible sensors in it, temperature, body temperature. It can analyze your heartbeat, your HRV, heart rate variability. Anyways, a lot of things. And what this made me realize is that it made me realize a lot of patterns in my sleep that are unique to me. So, for example, I've realized that by nature, I get very little REM sleep. I'm good with the deep sleep side of things, but REM sleep, I'm always in the red zone. If you look at the daily charts they give you after every sleep, I'm always in the red zone. Whatever I do, caffeine, no caffeine, workout, no workout, stress, no stress, I'm always in the red zone. So those are the types of things which technology allows, which I find beautiful, is that it allows people to make more personalized decisions about their lifestyle depending on their body. You know? And I'm actually curious, what is it? Why did you guys choose to create a startup in that industry exactly? Do you guys have a background in either, um, how do you say it, like medicine, or do you have a background in entrepreneurship? What if you guys can tell us a bit about both of you in a sense?
Go for it. I mean, are you talking specifically about sleep, sorry, or in?
No, I
No,
think it's
just in
talking about
general
DNA, genetics, like
about
I
Pink
guess
Genomics.
yeah, about Pink Genomics. Yeah, I guess I could start. I guess me and Dany, it's actually funny because me and Dany, we met in, I think it was our first or second year of university, after an exam actually about biology. And we got out of there and it was so hard. Like the exam was so hard. Everybody got out, they were looking at each other like, oh, like you could see in everybody's face that they weren't sure if they passed or not, or how well they did,
Right.
Sorry, let me just say how that exam was. We were sitting down in an auditorium, okay, and then they would have the question up on the screen for like a minute or two, and you just have to answer the question. So if you don't understand, or if you didn't have a chance to read the whole question, you basically missed it, and they never go back. So
No, it was so stressful, and especially because you're coming out of high school into university. Like in high school, you have like 20 people, always the same 20 people. It's your friends. And then you go to university, there's 300, 500 people. And this is your first exam in the auditorium. And you have limited amount of time to answer the
Yeah.
questions. And anyway, so we go out of there. And then I think I was looking a bit depressed. Dany was looking a bit depressed. Other people were depressed. And we started talking. And then that's how me and Dany met. You know, like we won't get into the details of what we said because I'm not sure if it was appropriate about to talk here. But just to go back to it, so me, I have a bachelor in biopharmaceutical science.
Nice.
During my bachelor, I did a specialization in genomics. Afterwards, I went to do a master's in bioinformatics. So bioinformatics is just the use of computer to really understand genetics. So in a broader sense, that's what it is. And I did my thesis there, published a few papers, and then afterwards I went to Montreal to work on a startup. The startup was about plants, but I guess it's a bit of the same thing because we're looking at genetics and plants, how we can make sure they grow properly, and etc. We sold the startup in 2019, and then now I'm working for Pink mostly and stuff like that. I guess Dany can talk about himself, but yeah, go ahead.
It's cool.
I mean, yeah, that's how we actually, Steve and I, we had a tutoring business together. And
oh yeah, I forgot our first business. Yes.
Yeah.
Elephant tutoring.
Elephant tutoring, yeah. So we started because we know what we realized is that, like, we knew that the industry demands years of experience for people who have no experience. You know what I mean? And we're like, well, if the industry isn't going to give us experience, we're going to have to make it for ourselves. You know, we're going to have to sit here and figure out how we can create something for ourselves. So we put together a quick little, a tutoring company. We used to go market ourselves at different high schools. We had people volunteer under us, and it was okay. Like, we obviously didn't make a lot of money off of
Then
it.
You got to say like it is our first successful failed business.
Yeah.
Right. There you go.
I still have our business cards, by the way.
Yeah, I still have it. Like, I find it sometimes. Like, I remember I went back home I think a couple months ago, and then my mom just showed it to me. She's like, "Oh, remember this?" I'm like, "Oh, wow."
Don't remind me, right? Yeah. So we went from there, and then after, like, I studied cell bio with, also I did a few years in specialization in genomics as well. And then after graduating, I went straight into the industry. I worked for the government for a little while, and then after that, I went to the private industry where I worked for a genetic testing company. And then at that company, what I would do is basically consult with a lot of researchers and doctors on how they can utilize genetic testing technology to run their projects. And from there, it gave me a lot of insight on how this technology can be applied, and what do people look for when they do it. Like, what kind of tests, what's interesting out there. So it kind of kept me on top of the industry. And then, I started talking with Steve one day, and then we got into a discussion about, like, hey, how can we utilize this? How can we benefit from it? You know what I mean? So we talked about it. Well, we both like fitness, we both like health. So, like, let's see if we can help people on the health industry side, and then we realized that, well, it's a well-known thing in the genetic world that genetic testing can be used for predetermining certain diseases, and one of the most predetermined one, or the most accurate tests for predisposition, is breast cancer. And then obviously we like our moms, I'm going to say everybody loves their mom, right? So we're like, okay, well, let's see if we can help people out by finding out if they have a predisposition to breast cancer. Since it's super accurate, it's been shown to, like, if you do have a certain BRCA gene, a certain mutation in that gene, then you're at higher risk by like 80 to 90%. You know what I mean? And obviously lifestyle plays a small role. Like, you were asking about lifestyle versus genetics, how does it influence somebody's life? Well, that one, it's highly genetically it's highly genetically influenced. Okay.
Yeah, and I think, Dany, sorry to interrupt you, but I think you're actually mentioning a very good point here, is that all of our tests, they don't actually tell you, we don't say you're going to have this because you have the mutation. It's you have the mutation, so you're more prone to a certain level. So there's always that distinction you have to think. I think that's what he was saying about BRCA1, BRCA2, is that people that have a certain mutation are more prone to develop breast cancer. So it's not because you have the mutation that you're actually going to have breast cancer. So there's always a small distinction that you have to think about. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry to disturb.
Yeah. So I mean, that's we can dive into it a little after. I see you got interested.
Yeah. If you guys can go ahead.
Yeah. So I'll just tell you, like, how we got started. So, but then we realized for doing anything that's diagnostic related, there's a lot of regulations around it. Like, it's a little tough to dive into it, especially if you don't have the financial backing to support you, especially if you want to sign up for, as a accredited institution that gives people diagnosis. You need to do a lot of registrations. It takes a lot of money. It costs millions of dollars, and we're like, okay, well, we're two guys with no money. How are we going to make that happen, So we scrapped that. We kept it on the back burner, but what we dove into more is health and fitness. Well, fitness, stress, and nutrition. And then from there, we did a lot of research. We understand the research, how it's done, how it's applicable, and then we put it all together and founded Pink Genomics the way that it is today.
What I really find incredible is how accessible this technology has become in the last 10 years. 20 years ago, it would have costed millions of dollars to get your genome sequenced. It would have costed, might not millions, but it was probably a really challenging task to do that. But today you can do it for a few $100s. There's a bunch of companies like Pink Genomix that really specialize in that industry. So, and that's the beautiful thing about technology, is how quickly it advances and how a lot of times I find that it serves humanity for the better. This technology, which is something I'd love to dive into in a few minutes, which is how this new revolution which is happening, which is personalized medicine, where you're going to start receiving diagnostics from the doctor. It can either be a physical doctor and an AI doctor based on your genomes. So for now, your doctor is not just going to prescribe you some template type of medication, but then it's going to become personalized for what works for your body. And all those things are possible because of this technology, which is understanding someone's DNA. So to talk about this a bit, what is it exactly about that technology that made it so accessible in the last decade and that really brought the cost down of analyzing someone's DNA?
Yeah, I'd say one of the reasons that I personally think that technology has gone to the point where we're able to do this for just a couple of $100 is computers. It's just technology. It's we're able to sequence something and analyze it so quickly, like millions of pairs in just a couple of minutes, couple of hours sometimes. So because of that and all the machines that we're doing, we can go into details about that, but just technologies allow us to take something that's so huge. Because before, when the first genome happened, is that actually people had to do small pieces of the genome. But now we have computers that can actually analyze this really quickly. And that's what we do in bioinformatics. And for me, the way computer has brought to 10 years ago, you would never think that you could have a supercomputer on your phone, in the hand of exactly an iPhone is so powerful. You can do so much thing on it. And now we can actually use this technology and then use it for DNA, analyze DNA, stuff like that. So it's really brought to how quickly the technology advances and how quickly computers are to analyze large sets of data that allow us to do something so quickly and rapidly.
So you're saying it's mostly the computing power that allowed this?
I think it's
because I'm sure you get millions of data points, and that's actually something I'm curious about. When you do send the saliva to the lab, basically,
Mm-hmm.
how do they give you the data? How does the data come? Does it come in a huge Excel sheet? What exactly do you see?
Yeah. So what we, because the beauty about what we do is that we don't actually, or you can't, I said the beauty of it just because I love what I'm doing, but what we actually do is that we don't sequence your whole genome. So because there's multiple research going on right now, there's a lot of regions that we know that are more prone to certain things. So these regions, these are the regions that we're going to sequence, and these are the regions that we're going to analyze. So just to give you a little bit of background, you have your DNA, and throughout the year, through mutations, your DNA sequence might change. And a change in DNA sequence is called a variation, also called SNP. So single nucleotide polymorphism. So just a variation, SNP. So what we look at is all those SNPs that have been linked to certain traits. So these are the what we're going to sequence. So we're going to have 600,000 of different SNPs that we think the community of the research community is actually looking at. So these are the 600, and I would say it's about 700,000, but these are the regions that we are going to sequence. And this is what we analyzed. Yeah, so what we do is that our platform, what it does is analyze multiple SNPs, so six to 700 SNPs, 6 or 700 SNPs, yes. And those variants are what we analyze. So when we look at your genome, When we say that you have a mutation in your gene, is we're looking at a specific region where we know that where a mutation is going to occur is going to affect your gene, which is going to affect the protein, which is going to affect your body. So that's what we look at. So we don't sequence your whole genome. We sequence small regions where we know that it's going to impact your body.
Okay, so you're specifically looking for those hints that are gonna give you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because that makes a lot of sense. So
Exactly. So
that
that's what we're able to. That's what we're able to provide it, provide you information so quickly. Like let's say, like most of our competitors, they'll come and they'll be able to do it in 7 to 8 weeks, where us we do it in 2 weeks. Like there's all the factors too about our volume, the way we do it, our operations. But like the majority, like if you go to sequence, like let's say for ancestry and stuff like that, you send it. Usually takes like 6 to 7 weeks to actually receive your data. But for us, the way we do it, we are only doing it in 2 weeks. But we have the same amount of data. We have the same, like they use the same technique, but that's what we do it.
We can actually
Right.
use their reports to analyze fitness and nutrition.
That too, yeah. Our platform is compatible with most of our competitors. Well, not they're not competitors because they're not tapping the fitness market, but all of 23andMe, Ancestry, and all of those Ancestry platforms, yeah.
Yeah, so that's actually I like that example, Danny, Stephen. Sorry, because it's interesting how, like, for example, let's say you were looking for a screwdriver in your house. Instead of looking in every single room in the kitchen, you open the closet, you look under your socks. All you do is you just go to the garage where you have your toolbox. So that's what you're basically doing with you spot those specific things that will give you information.
Exactly, yeah.
One thing that I really want to talk about, which I've been excited about all day to talk about you, which is about the future technologies that are going to be shaping this whole gene editing industry. What are some of the leading technologies that are going to help us basically understand our genome, but more specifically, edit them so that we humans can live better, longer, and healthier lives?
Yeah, I mean, we can. Sorry, I thought Steve froze for a second. He just
No. I was gonna say something, but then I saw you coming
I
towards the
think
camera, so I'm like, okay, he's gonna talk.
I think he had a moment of contemplation.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to jump in and say, like, gene editing, like, as we know it today, is not it's something that humans have been doing for a really long time. You know what I mean? In terms of, like, if we think about the domestication of animals, from wild wolves to domestic dogs, and we were essentially, when people were breeding dogs for the purpose of domesticating them, they were doing gene editing, basically. Maybe not at the molecular level or at the cellular level, but they were doing it by traits. Like, let's look at what traits. Let's take the most docile dogs and let them breed together. So they're editing. By doing that, you're basically deleting all the wild dog or the wild wolf genes, and
Mhm.
and you're preferring the ones that are more docile, the ones that are more friendly, the ones that are more lovable and can live in a house, basically. So I mean, it's been a long time that people have been doing these gene editing techniques, just not as in depth as we can do it today. Even if we think about, I think it's Mendeleev, his or I don't know his name exactly. It's been like 10 years I haven't read it, but he used to basically he used to grow peas, like green peas, and he used to grow them either for green peas or yellow peas. And by mixing different genes together, by like maybe cutting a stem, putting a root here, putting a seed here, different seedlings, growing them together, he would see the types of peas that would grow in his garden. So that's
Oh,
also gene editing. That's where it came from. That's the history of where it stems from. But what we have today is obviously way more advanced and way more technical, and we can actually do it at the cellular level. Um, and the technology, as you know, is obviously it's called CRISPR. The technology that we use today, or scientists use today, to modify the genetic code, or to use it to cut out, insert, delete different parts of a person's genome. It's a really cool technology, but I think it goes with the disclaimer to say that, like, a lot of people are scared about it. They think that, for example, maybe the vaccines might have it. Now is very relevant time to talk about it because of COVID, because of all of that. People are scared of like, oh, what's an mRNA vaccine? What's this and that? Like people are think that the government is there trying to, you know, I don't want to get into specifics
Some
about
people
it,
do, yeah. Yeah.
political things behind that, but like a lot of people have a fear of vaccine just because it's a huge unknown, and we can blame the government for not properly educating the population about what vaccines are and what they do, and you can even blame the media for putting a lot of emphasis on research that doesn't really have a lot of backing. Like I don't want to get into that too much right now, but those are some things that we can say, like people are the fear behind gene editing, is that can it be used to hurt me? And people obviously are scared of things that they don't know. And now what we can do is we can dive into it to maybe explain it just a little better for whoever's your listeners are.
Exactly. I think that's where you guys come in. I think everyone has heard of the term CRISPR, but very little of us actually understand what it is exactly. So if you can give us like the broad definition of how does it work exactly?
I think the best way to describe it is actually to go back into history and then tell you how it came to be. So it was actually two women that discovered it. And like most scientific research, like all the best research that were done by luck, you're looking for something and then you have something else. And that's how you find something that's better. You're like, oh, wow, Albert Einstein, and now put that falls in your head type of thing. But so then what they were doing is that they were looking at bacteria and they wanted to know how the viruses were coming in and how they were infecting it and how bacteria were reacting to it. So CRISPR, the way it is a sequence of DNA in your body. And then when a virus comes in, it has a mRNA inside of it, goes inside your cell. And CRISPR, what it does is that it's going to have a sequence of DNA that's exactly the same sequence that's in the virus. So you have this sequence of DNA, you have Ks9, which is a protein that's going to attach to the CRISPR sequence, and it's going to be looking for that exact same sequence within the virus. And once it finds the same sequence in the virus, it's going to snip the DNA of the virus, and this is actually going to kill, if I can say, the virus. It's going to protect the bacteria against the virus. So CRISPR originally is a method of defense from the bacteria to a virus. But then, if you think about it, okay, so if you can have this DNA actually attack the virus and protect yourself from a virus, when I say yourself, I'm talking about bacteria here, what could you do in a human body? Could you actually go and find, like for us, like we know that there are certain variation, like Dany was talking about BRCA1, BRCA2, so let's use that example. So what if you knew the sequence of BRCA1 and BRCA2 that could give you cancer, and you put it inside a CRISPR sequence, then you have your Ks9 protein attached to it, and it's going to look for that same region within a person that has cancer or potentially more prone to have cancer, snip that region, and we replace that region with a sequence of a person that is not prone to have cancer. So that was the idea behind CRISPR. You have this sequence that you know that it could be prone to a certain disease. You replace this with a sequence that is more favorable for you, and that way you can eradicate the disease inside of it. But there's always stuff that you have to think about, because right now what CRISPR is being used of, or what it's thought of being used for, is for medication purposes.
Right.
So it's not actually going to go down from generation to generation, like it's on somatic cells and not like embryo and stuff like that. So you're actually treating a person. So in order to eradicate a disease, you will have to eradicate all of the cells that have that sequence of DNA.
Yeah, you are. I'm actually thinking about it. I'm thinking about what you said because it's extremely interesting and I never thought about it. So you're saying, let's say you end up editing a gene in me that let's say that's gonna allow me to live an extra few years because I won't get Alzheimer. Let's throw an example out there. Um, so if you do edit that gene, and I do end up having kids in a few years, that gene will not go down through my generations.
No, because the way it works is
Ah,
that you have two types of cells. reproductive, I'm going to say easy term, reproductive cells, and then your regular cells. And your regular cells are the cells that are in your body doing your function and everything. And reproductive cells, sperms, ovules, all of those, these are the ones that are going to be passed down from generations to generations. So when you're actually modifying something in your body, it doesn't pass down to generation because it's not those reproductive cells. Like let's say you go outside and then you burn your skin, okay, because of
Right.
the UV lights. You know that something's gonna happen, but it's not because you have like a modified cells because they were done with UV that your kids are actually gonna have it. So I know it's really a broad idea and I'm really extrapolating, but that's the idea behind it. So when we actually modify something with CRISPR, like in a medication type of way, we're not actually affecting the next generations.
Okay, okay. Interesting.
But
That
if I can add, sorry,
yeah.
like that's the big controversial about CRISPR is that we could actually do it in an embryo stage. And if you were to do it in an embryo stage, which are the first cells, then it would be passed down from generation to generations. And this actually has
Oh,
been
there you
done
go.
once in China by a scientist, and then there was a big controversial because he did it, and there was actually twins. I think they were called Lulu and Nana that actually were born from a CRISPR like modification, and
I
then
remember
them
that, yeah.
exactly. So
It was
them for
very
them,
controversial.
if they were to live, and then they will have a mutation, and we don't know about it. These mutation will be passed down from generation to generation because it was done in an embryo and not in somatic cells.
There you go. That makes a lot more sense. I was confused for a second because I remember that there's an experiment going on right now, I believe it's in Florida, where they released 50 million mosquitoes that had an edited gene. And what they're doing there is that they edited the mosquitoes, I think they were female mosquitoes, in a way where any kids they get in the future are going to be sterile. So they won't be able to have kids. So over 2-3 generations, they're gonna eradicate an entire colony of mosquitoes. And I'm assuming that was done using basically CRISPR technology, where they were able to modify the embryos of those mosquitoes.
Yeah, honestly, I haven't heard about it, so I don't want to say anything if it was done through CRISPR and stuff like that. But probably, I don't know, Danny, if you heard about it.
No, I haven't. But what I wanted to mention is the ethics behind CRISPR.
Right.
Like, because we're talking about the embryo modification and some things about that. And so, like, if talking about it in general, your first thing might be like the ethics. You might think, or my first impression would be like, well, the ethics behind it say that if you're gonna do a designer baby, is what they call it. If you can choose what you want to delete and what you want to insert into a gene, and then it's like, well, that's ethically incorrect. Like just like the twins that were born in China, people are going to be like, well, how are you editing a baby? What are you doing here? Maybe you're going to kill it. Maybe you're going to hurt it. Like all these different things, right?
Right.
But then the ethics actually goes to on the flip side, is if we have this technology available and we don't use it to help prevent certain diseases, are we allowing people then to die while we know that there's a preventative measure that we can do about it? You know what I mean? So people think that it's one way, but it's actually, I think, the other way. Where it's, well, I mean, if for example, I knew that, this person's kid are all gonna have, a genetic disorder of cancer, for example, cancer at a young age, right? Now, what parent wants to deal with that? Nobody.
Right.
God forbid, nobody wants their kid to have cancer at a young age. So if we knew coming in and that this embryo is going to turn into a human, and that human at 7, 8, 9 years old is going to develop cancer, and we can do something about it with this technology called CRISPR, would it be unethical to not help that baby and not help the embryo? You know what I mean? So that's why the ethics are really tough, because it's like, okay, we have this technology we know can modify a person's genomic makeup, right? But it's like,
That's right.
okay, do we continue making it? Because this can be used to make superhumans. It can be used to make, all these next level sci-fi things.
That's right.
And it can ruin the makeup of humanity, okay? Ruin our million years of evolution that we've come with.
actually wanted to. Sorry, actually wanted to jump on that because that's a really interesting thought that you brought up here. It's the controversial really becomes, and that's where the gray zone gets created, where you go into what's the difference between curing and enhancing someone. So where you're curing children, just like you said, that have the potential of developing cancer in the late future, versus enhancing someone where instead of where you can start enhancing certain traits such as intelligence, beauty, running speed, for example, in the context of fitness. So that's where it really gets tricky, and I don't know how we as a society we're still in a way in an area where we don't know how we're going to be dealing with that because there aren't really any rules and regulations in place to deal with that. But I do think it's inevitable where we start reaching a point where we're going to start creating designer babies. That might be a bit controversial what I'm saying, but I do think by the way we're heading with technology right now, we are going to reach a point where designer babies are going to be the norm, and being born the natural way is going to make you subject to a lot of diseases and a lot of things that are unappealing as a human being. You know what I mean?
No, definitely. Like even right now, like we don't think about it, but we're already doing something similar. Like let's say if we talk about Down syndromes,
Mm.
like when a woman is pregnant, you do a test at one point to know if your baby has certain diseases, and then at that point you could terminate the life of the baby if you wanted to. Like in
Well,
Europe,
that's an
I think
embryo
it's
at that stage, right? It's we don't want to use the term baby because
okay.
it
Sorry.
humanizes
Yeah.
cells.
So you could terminate the embryo at that stage. And so we're already doing something similar. It goes back to what you're saying, is that we're
Right.
already selecting people or selecting embryons. Sorry, Danny. We're already selecting embryons based on genetic diseases that they could have. So we're slowly getting there. It's like you said, at one point, this might become the norm, where we're like, okay, well, I could prevent my baby from having this and that and that. I want babies with blue eyes. I want baby with speed. I want baby that are tall, 7 foot tall. And then it's really a controversial area. But at the end of the day, like I think that the best way for the government to actually approach it is to allow scientists to actually research it
Mhm.
and put norms around it. Because if they don't, there's a billionaire somewhere that's going to pay millions and millions of dollars to find this technology. And once he's going to find it, he's going to own it. And then what is he going to do about it? Is he going to control a whole country? Is he going to have an army of superpowered people, like a super saiyans and stuff like that? Like we don't know what's going to happen, you know. So it is a controversial area, but definitely like it's going to move forward. So it's inevitable, but we have to find norms to really look around it and make sure that it goes forward in the right way, so that it actually helps people and not enhance other stuff. Yeah.
In a sense, what Danny mentioned, which is that it might completely destroy thousands of years of evolution of human beings, but you can also look at it in a way where this is the next evolution phase for human beings. You know, because we humans have not evolved on the genetic level in the past 10,000 years. You know, we're living in modern societies, but as prehistoric individuals. You know, we have right now the same genes living in mega cities as our ancestors had living in the African savannah. You know, and there's a problem there. And I do think that those technologies will be an opportunity for us to break out of those ancestral genes and basically help design humans of the future that have the traits that will basically help us become a better species as a whole. You know,
And the other way that we could see it is that we don't necessarily need to enhance ourselves, but just protect ourselves against certain diseases so that we can move forward. Like let's say right now, like the big topic is COVID-19. But what if we could develop a CRISPR that would attack certain genes in your body that will allow you not to have COVID-19? Like it's a huge pandemic. Like we were stuck in the lab spirit for a whole year just because of one virus. But what if we could use CRISPR to eradicate this whole thing. Like we just sequence it, we know where it is, we go into your
Right.
body, we give everybody that vaccine, and then that's it. Because we have that CRISPR thing, and then all the variation of that virus could also potentially be treated at the same time. So it is like CRISPR could actually become the next thing where it allows us maybe not to evolve, but to live longer, to not die of one virus, so that it's really a big subject too.
It is. What do you
I
think,
mean,
Danny?
like genetic manipulation of our genome is one thing, but there's also like, I think in 20 years time, maybe in our lifetime, for sure in our lifetime, but
Yeah.
beyond, which is even like more of a higher probability, that like people are gonna have, people are gonna basically become cyborgs, man. Like we're already tied to our phone 24/7. It's like an extension of our brain. Tell me the last time you remembered a phone number by heart, and it's like nobody knows a phone number, and
Yeah. Everybody knows one phone number, which
I
is
mean,
theirs.
as of recently,
Okay.
no, I'm not talking about like your own phone number or somebody's number that you knew for a long
Yeah, I
time.
agree.
Like,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
talking about like people I used to know as a kid. I used to remember like my house number, my everybody's phone number that I knew. You used to just dial it and you knew it by heart, But now like your phone is an extension of your brain. It has it's like another memory storage place. It's like, well, I don't need to remember it. I got my phone. So I mean, at some point I feel like we're sort of semi cyborgs now, but
Yeah.
we're going to get to a point where it's going to be more integrated into who we are, just like Elon Musk is working on Neuralink and trying to
Amazing.
put a new whole skull onto your brain and just like help you what's supposed to be for people that have Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or suffer from seizures and stuff like that, but also like can be used for increasing memory, for example, or making people stronger or whatever it is, and I feel like we're going to reach a point where like gene editing is going to be a tiny part of a much bigger thing of human enhancement, and
Okay.
I feel like, honestly, I feel like it's the only way the future is going to happen. Like that's
But I'm actually thinking about what you're saying right now. And then what I'm thinking is that if it does become something of a norm, then how much is it going to cost? Like, who is it going to be available to? Like, are only the rich people going to be able to afford it?
At
Like,
the
is it
start,
going to?
just like anything, any new technologies
Yeah.
are first only available to the rich people or people that have the means
Right.
and ability to buy it. Just like TVs used to only be for rich people, but now it's like anybody can afford it.
I know,
Just
but
like
like
phones,
for me, like it's something physical and then something about your body and then your life. Like, let's say if I was super rich. No, I'm actually not going to talk about me. Let's say somebody's super rich, because I was going to say something bad. So let's say somebody's super rich, and then he discovered CRISPR, and then he discovered how not to age.
Mhm.
Like that's powerful information. He
Yeah.
can actually decide who lives longer and who doesn't.
Yeah.
Like when you think about it, it's
You could,
Ethically,
yeah.
yeah.
You could. I think the what's beautiful about the world we live in, which is the free market and capitalism, is that inventions always find their way to the bottom of the food chain, if you want to call it a food chain. It always finds its way to the bottom for the only reason that this is where most of the money lies. It's when you're able to offer a product to the general population. Samsung and LG only were able to create cheap TVs so that they can grow their business at the end of the day. So that's why, and it's a really interesting topic. It's an incredible topic, and it opens opportunities but also dangers. Because for example, in China and in France right now, actually, I made a post about that about a month ago. In France, the government really recently granted approval to start using gene editing to help soldiers recover from warfare, and in China they're using it the other way around, where they're actually enhancing people, so sorry. It's just they're creating a bigger, better, smarter, stronger, faster individuals that are primed for warfare. And that's something maybe we can use that just to touch on a final note. That's where things get tricky. It's when you start having different governments competing against the same technology. In a sense, so let's say the US bans enhancement technology for CRISPR, where you can only use it to cure but not to enhance. Now, what ends up happening is that in China, where they don't follow the same rules, for example, they can start enhancing their soldiers there and their people, and then all of a sudden you have people in China are much smarter than the people in the US and in the Western world. So all of a sudden, China is taking over the market and all those things. So that's where we're gonna react, and all of a sudden, the government's gonna open up this technology, because at the end of the day, it's a game of competition. So that's why I was saying, in a sense, where it is inevitable, where we're gonna start designing individuals, just like we design the body of our cars, basically.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it's interesting whenever countries or industries compete, because that's when some of the greatest advancements in technology happen. Like
Yeah.
if you look at, for example, in the time where the Russia and the US were racing to get to the moon, and some of the greatest technological rocket technology was developed in that point in time. It's because of competition. It's because of people want the bragging rights to say that we were the first to the market to ever create this, or we were the first to achieve this or achieve that. And the thing is, like, maybe 20, 30, 40 years later, what they had achieved is such a tiny part of a much bigger thing. And that's why I think it's important to have these competitions between countries, between industries, because I feel like it's a sort of a fun way to figure out what works and what doesn't in the fastest way possible, because everybody wants to be the first to do something, right? And
Right.
like it's if people ban it because of ethical reasons, it might be because of a lack of understanding as to what can be done with this technology, or a fear of, okay, well, if we do this, then maybe it's going to hurt a certain population. Like, for example, if China is using this to build soldiers, these soldiers are still human at the end of the day. What happens after the war? What's going to happen after they're done their training, after they're done, like, are they going to be sort of prisoners of war for the rest of their life? Are they going to be shackled to this name of prisoner because they've invested money and technology into them? Or are they going to be allowed to be freed from it after they're done their time in the military?
Right.
Like, are they less human? Or like it's still a human. What's this guy going to do with all these gene editings? Like, he doesn't need to be whatever the genes are. Like, he's not going to need them when he's a 50-year-old man sitting on his couch. Or are they expecting all these guys to go into war and they just want to have them in a disposable way? Like, okay, you're going to go fight and die, you're going to go fight and die, you're going to go fight and die. Like, so then they don't have to worry about the long term. So it's interesting about how it's going to be utilized. But I think that also there has to be some sort of guidelines and limitations as to how the technology is applied.
Yeah. Yeah, those are all really good questions. And we'll see, man, how the world evolves in the next decade. But until then, guys, where would you like to send people if they want to learn more about you guys, if they want to learn more about Pink Genomics? What's the best place people can go to?
They could go on our website, www.pinkgenomix.com. That's PINKGENOMIX.com. Or follow us on Instagram, PNKGENOMIX, Pink Genomics. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's where people will be able to learn how to get their own genome tested, and they're going to get data over their own body, which I absolutely recommend. Anyways, you guys, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having us. It was a pleasure.
Had a good time, guys.
Yeah, you too, man. It was really fun.